take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland. And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
Welcome to Life in Red.
Boom, we're live. Jan Ditchfield, thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me in.
I saw your post, a little context from Maurice, who was a guest on the podcast a few episodes ago, and I immediately was kind of wowed at the premise of what you were doing. I found it so interesting. It's called Rise. Mm-hmm. Tell us a little bit about that, because I think it's really cool.
So Rise is my company that we have just launched this month, actually, and we provide back-to-work strategies for mothers returning to work. Great.
So, I mean, you sent me your bio, and I was kind of, so you're very kind of, you've been involved with entrepreneurial stuff, I guess, for a while, award-winning even.
Yes.
We'll get into why you wanted to start this before, but like, take us through a little bit of your journey to this point. Have you always been an entrepreneur type character? I know you have some volunteer experience. I know it's a long-winded answer, or question, but
that's okay. I think I probably always was. I think what I probably was growing up was more a person who had a lot of big ideas and had absolutely no understanding of how to execute them. So I think becoming an entrepreneur took some time to understand that the idea actually has to be turned into something. And that's where I'm thankful for business school for that, which is what kind of gave me the grounding of saying, okay, well, I now know how to take an idea and put a business plan around it. But I launched my first nonprofit in 2009, and that one was called, at the time it was called One with One, and we focused on helping people who are blind regain confidence through sport, and it was specifically triathlon that we did. And it rebranded to the Tandem Project a few years later, but I ran that for close to 10 years. And then I also just launched another nonprofit in 2017 called Bridge C14, and it's an organization that provides support for family members who are going through the MAID process, so medical assistance in dying.
Oh, wow,
so,
okay.
They offer support from like beginning, middle, and end throughout the process, because there are no support systems in place for families.
Yeah.
So it was something that I saw a gap and built the organization. It's run by a CEO now, an amazing woman whom I adore, but I was kind of the person who put it together and then got it up and running and stepped out.
Right. Now, were those based on like personal experiences, or you just kind of saw like this was happening and started asking questions about it?
Personal experience and seeing a gap that somebody wasn't addressing it. So both cases were. With my first nonprofit, it was because a friend of mine lost their sight, and I saw what happened to her life. And in the case of the second one, it's because I went through the MAID process with my mother. And we were one of the first ones to go through the process in the Ottawa region, and it was incredibly difficult to find anyone to talk to or get support from. So it's just what I seem to do. If I see a gap, I somehow get determined I'm going to fill it. So
very, very admirable, because like you said, a lot of people have great ideas and all these big ideas, and then to implement them and eventually get them off the ground and started, that's I mean, it's great. It truly is.
Thank you.
If you don't mind me asking, I know that might be a big subject, but going through that process specifically of MAID and it being so new, like, have you seen growth through your organization and the non-for-profit now, like for people who might be going through it? Like, has there been steps made, or is like the government still kind of like, it's like a very taboo subject for a lot of people?
It's changing. It has changed a lot. Yeah, I think like when I went through it, I wouldn't speak about it. I was something that nobody really knew. There was a very, very small group of people who knew what was happening, which made it harder because when you go through cancer, you can always find someone who can relate to that. Or if you've gone through other types of terminal illness, there's always a support system in place. But with MAID, it was so hush-hush, and you were so careful not to talk about things, or embarrassed or concerned, that there was a whole level of grief that kind of got added on to the grief that you were already in. But it's changing. I think it's dependent, too, on where you are and what community you live in. So people who are more urban tend to have a better experience than people who are more rural. People who are more open with it and have really close family and more, tend to have a better experience than those who perhaps are coming from really religious backgrounds or don't feel as though they have the same family members, or having to. For me, what was so difficult was trying to get support and make the system work in our favor. Because what we were trying to do was my mom wanted to die in home. And up until that point, nobody was providing MAID outside of hospitals. So trying to get someone to agree to let my mother die in her home was beyond challenging. So
Wow.
so that was really kind of where the struggles that I had were specific to that, and then specific to living through that level of grief and trauma of going through that. So, and then it lasted, like it held on for a while. So,
Yeah. So was it more of the not-for-profit, is it like an advocacy, or like do you actually are able to connect services? Because you mentioned, on this podcast, we've had numerous people come on and share their mental health stories and with PTSD and trauma and all those things. And I mean, just in general, to find a service to help you in a timely fashion is difficult. But for something like that, which is, I don't want to say it's niche, but not necessarily everybody goes through it. Like, is your organization aimed on trying to actually connect the supports with people who are going through it? Or is it just more like kind of like a generally raising the awareness about it?
No, it's not an advocacy organization at all. It's full support.
Right.
So yeah, it's 100% support based. So the majority of the work that they do is in creating meetups around the country. So family members are able to get together with family members, have a cup of coffee or a drink and talk about how they feel, or they can talk about normal things. Like sometimes we just have conversations about, how are your kids doing type of thing. There's an online network as well that's been created. The woman who runs it now, our CEO, is a social worker. So it's very social work based, the work that's being done. And it's nothing to do with advocacy. Like, well, we listen and definitely and participate in the conversation, I would say, but it's not the focus of it. The focus is on wanting people to feel supported and healing.
Yeah. That's very interesting. I had no clue of that when you were coming in here too.
Yeah.
So it's nice that pops up spontaneously. The reason though, we definitely wanted to get together and chat was about Rise. And, again, I always like to kind of, when I meet people and we're talking on the podcast, I like to bring up the layman. I'm not a woman, obviously. I'm not, involved. Even when my brothers were born, I was very young, so I didn't understand pregnancy. Now, in the, I guess, pop culture and the media, motherhood, it's the 9 months, you go back to work, everything's great, everything's fun. You hear a lot about America and that they don't even provide that service of maternity leave. So here in Canada, the common, I guess, for people who aren't inside the situation is that, like, it's pretty good for women here. I'm guessing it's not quite as easy as someone who has no real experience around it thinks it is.
Yeah, I think, and I will say that before I had any real experience around it, I thought it was also easy. And I was very mistaken when I returned to work. So for me, because of the type of work that I did, I would run my nonprofits, but I also worked as a gun for hire. So I would go in and work for nonprofit organizations on specific projects. So they usually had to do with marketing or raising funds or fixing operations. So it was very time pressured, very driven, all consuming type of work. And I would go in, get out, go in, get out, go in, get out. And that's pretty much kind of the supplement of how I did my career growing up. And I was quite known for that. So for the change for me, what happened was I ended up becoming a mom later in life. So I had my daughter at 42, I was well into my career at that point. And for me, I had gone through the process with my mom and, kind of then had to go through the grief process with that and understand that. Then I decided, okay, I'm ready to go back into my career full time and get back into the swing of it. And I did some big projects and then took an extended maternity leave. So I was off for 14 months when I decided that I was ready to go back to work. And I think for me, the biggest misconception was that I could just ease back into that old life and without having to make any modifications. And so the stress that I went through of trying to ease back into that life while I have another human being 100% reliant upon me, it just backfired completely. I think that some women probably have really great return to work experiences, but I think there's a lot of women who realize after they have a child that they don't want to go back to the career they were in. They don't want to do the hours that they were doing. Most of the time, you end up seeing your child only for maybe an hour a day, and that's not necessarily how all people want to parent.
Right.
So that's where the choice comes down, I think, is the bigger question is, what type of choice are you making with your own profession and where do you want to be? And that's what what my business is focused on is personalized responsive support. So what we're doing is working with women to specifically target what is the goal and here's the strategies in place to get to that goal. So it's not like an all-consuming, we think all women should behave the same way when they return to work, or this is completely based on what's your goal and what's going to make you happy within your family situation.
That's because we live in a kind of a time, and even you kind of speaking about it, that pressure, the time sensitive, like the all-consuming work. I feel a lot of people we're in that kind of that grind mentality of society, and you hear people talk about that a lot, and your burnout coming up and all those things. But I think for a lot of women it might be even a little bit worse because you're under that scope of having to maybe think you have to do more or have to do more to get the attention or to outperform other people to get that recognition or that promotion or that raise. Women are under a lot of pressure, not only societally, but personally to perform at work and really show that they're hard workers, I guess, in a way. So it's interesting to have that perspective of choice. So you're not saying that's necessarily bad if you don't want it to be. No,
I think not at all. I think the reality for women right now is that, we've about 82% of women work outside of the home now, and they still contribute to 80% of the chores inside the home. So if you think of that balance, right, of like how are you, and then you add a child into the middle of that, where is the time left for you?
Right.
Where's the time? No one can balance a load like that successfully. And I took a lot of pride in the fact that I could handle a lot of stress and that I was able to juggle a lot of things. And, with my own feelings of failure as a working mom, I think that would be a good way to describe how I felt when I just realized that I couldn't do with the load, this much of a load at this pace. Came down to the choices of what was best for me and my family. So that's where I think there's some women who really are focused on their careers are really important to them. Mine is extremely important to me. I very much define myself by my profession. I always have. But at the end of the day, wanting to be with my daughter and wanting to be able to be a major influence in her life outweighs some of the other things. Right. So it came a matter for me of how am I going to redefine myself as a professional, and so that I can balance out the things that make me happy as a woman with the things that make me happy as a wife and a mother. And that's where this business came from. Right. Yeah.
You mentioned the feeling of failure, and that is, something I've heard over and over again. And I'm just curious, was it failure? You felt a failure as like a businesswoman in your career, a failure as a mother, kind of like a combination of the two? Like, what were kind of your emotions before making these decisions?
I felt like a failure as everything.
Yeah.
So as a mother, as a business person, a professional, as a woman, as a spouse, like I just felt like, as an individual, just trying to carry all of that and understand how to manage the stress loads within it. I think, and not being able to talk about it. I think that was the other piece, was that I did the opposite of what you should do. So instead of talking about my stress, I pushed it down, and I thought, I'm weak. I can be stronger than this. I think it's the classic thing everybody talks about when it comes to, riding that thin line of, your mental health stress really is what it is.
Absolutely.
So I think when I finally got to the point that I realized this was not the way I wanted to be, and it was a good 7-8 months in before I sat back and said, this is not working for me. I need to make some changes to make myself happy. And again, so when I did, and I finally, took the time to step back and really examine like what I was facing, I was experiencing upwards of 50 panic attacks a day. I was breaking out in stress rashes. I started losing my hair. So I think, that no one wants to live that way.
Yeah.
Like, you just don't want to live like that. So,
did you, now, again, you don't have to answer this completely if you don't want to, but was there a history of, mental illness or mental health problems for you before that? Or was it like, this was like a very acute thing where like, it was all new to you? Or like, was it kind of like a build, like just trying to get the mindset of where you were at when you had to make this choice?
So for me, I think like anxiety had been something that was always very normal in my life from a child onward. But I don't think I ever identified it as being like a mental health thing. It was just like, I was high strung, right? I'd get into situations and I'd have an anxiety attack, but the level of this, I'd never experienced anything like this before. So, like when I remember the day that I broke out in that rash and I couldn't figure out what was happening, I thought I was having an allergy attack, and Dr. Google quickly came to the rescue. And when I realized, I was like, well, that makes an awful lot of sense. So it was in the same day I brushing my teeth and stood up and looked, and I've got this giant bald spot on the top of my head. And the day before, there was hair there. And I was just like, nope, this has got to stop. I think it's amazing what stress does to your body. And I think it's amazing what you can convince yourself is normal until you decide that, no, this is actually not normal. This isn't the healthy way to be.
Yeah. I have a friend, she was on this podcast before. Her name's Mallory Rowan. And a similar experience that she actually just recently shared not too long ago. But like, she started a business and it was growing, and you think everything's all hunky-dory on the outside, but she shared very similar. And now, instead of running that business, she runs kind of like a business coaching where it's called Business Without Burnout. And it's all about trying to create a successful business without that stress that you said that manifested so physically for you.
Yeah.
I've never experienced that, but like the stress for me, like I chronically have like tight shoulders, and I clench my jaw and grind my teeth.
Yeah.
And I remember talking to my doctor. He's like, "Oh yeah, it's probably stress. You should cut it down." What do you mean? Like, stress is just you're having a bad day, and it's But like when you learn about the science and everything behind it, and how much it actually affects everything.
Yes. Yeah.
And it starts leaking into your other parts of your life where you don't want it to. When it might just be work stress, all of a sudden you're, maybe obsessively talking about things a lot, or lashing out, or it's scary, very scary. So you started this business now. What kind of things, do you see? So, obviously not specific stories, but like, I'm sure there's just a diverse set of challenges and problems that are coming to you with this. Like, again, coming from somebody who's completely naive to all these situations, what are women going through when they're trying to get back to work out after maternity leave and having a child?
So it's right across the board.
Yeah.
So some women have actually taken like extended time off. So they've stayed home and raised, 2 children or more. So they've been out of the workforce for years at this point. And now they're trying to figure out, how do I take my skills and get back in. There's other women that I've worked with who've decided that they're going to go back to school. So they're transitioning from employment to motherhood to school, being a student as a mother, and then trying to completely change their career and get back out again. There's some people that I look at, as I talked before, are trying to make transitional changes. So they don't want to be working where they worked anymore, or they want to be working in a different department than they were working in. Most of the time, what I'm seeing is the common similarity is that either what they were doing is not filling them with passion anymore, or the career that they had was very high level driven career, and they need to back down to something that still fills them but doesn't drive them. So those seem to be like the 2 biggest ones that I'm currently working with, and that's why we do I have a lot of time with my clients where I'm talking about, and reimagining who you are and recreating who you are and really working on that personal brand again. So your professional identity changes. For me, it did after having a child, and I think there's a lot of women who could relate to that. And then saying, well, how do I go from being mummy to being, Ms. Ditchfield in a boardroom again, when my brain is still thinking about, oh, did I pack her this and did I do that, and I have to get home on this time, and not being able to stay or want to stay after hours and do evening events and things like that, because you're going to miss bath time. You're going to miss bedtime. You're going to miss those things. So most of the clients I work with, that's what they're focused on, is trying to find balance, trying to avoid burnout. I think it's just like your friend was doing. So the same reason I created this business was I hope more women don't have to experience that level of stress when they decide that they want to resume their careers again. And there's a lot of changes that need to be done within the employment industry. Period. We really need to start looking at being more family focused and being less driven by producing and expecting that 60-hour work weeks are normal. They're not. It's the way that the work week was defined was back when men would work and women would stay home. So there was an equal division of labor, but that doesn't happen very much anymore. You need two incomes most of the time to run a house now. Unless you've managed a lot of sacrifices otherwise. So there's that pressure. And then there's a pressure of university and putting away for your future of your children and figuring out retirement and tickety tick. So
it's not cheap raising a child for sure.
No, it is not.
My parents have adopted 5 kids now.
Wow.
So now that we're all grown up, they're raising a family again. And just, watching everything that they have to pay for and everything, but the dramatic rise of cost.
Yeah.
Like it's obscene. Even daycare. I'm like, but it has seriously made me consider, do I want to have kids? And if so, I know I don't want to have a large family now because of that stress of the cost, taking everything else aside. So, I mean, even talking about what we're talking about and returning to work, that added stress of trying to raise your child or kids with the expenses and,
afford them.
Yeah. And actually, do you think that plays into, women and getting back to work and maybe reevaluating things? It's like, I need a higher paying job. Like, is that an issue people are grappling with and trying to move up a little bit or at all? Like, is that a concern?
I think, again, that is probably individual and with something like that more than it is like paint a broad swath with that. I think most of the women I'm currently talking to and what I'm working with are trying to either move up in their career or equal out to where they currently are. So, but I don't know if it's necessarily as much driven by money as it is by where people are age-wise and where they are in their career. Goals. So, which I think is another interesting conversation to look at. A lot of women I'm working with are millennials, and so they've had children and they're kind of like mid-career, whereas I was well into a career when I had a child. So for me, my goals were very, very different because I had achieved a lot of professional goals before having my daughter. So for me now, my focus is a lot more on lifestyle balance, I think, than it has been on achievement. So, it's a completely different thing. Right. It's again individual. So, and it's why the work I'm doing is personalized work. You can't expect that all people are going to feel the same thing or have the same experience. So you shouldn't treat people the same way. Yeah.
Speaking, we were talking about the things that need to change in the workplace and all that. I'm curious. So, you've been through a pretty extensive career with a lot of different experiences. Has the workplace gotten better for mothers coming back to work? Since you started, have you seen a progression? And then after that, I'm very curious, like, in your opinion, what are some big things that need to change about how we view women and mothers and parents in general in the workforce? Just speaking from experience, I know there's still a lot of stigma and guilt surrounding, like, I have to take the work day off to take care of my sick kid.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I know people judge people who do that, and I'm like, you're like taking it off again, right? So that's just a clear example from my point of view. But, you know, I am curious, like, how much growth have we actually made in the past 20 years, 30 years? And in your opinion, what are some big things that could really change to help reduce some of that stigma?
I don't necessarily know if we've made a lot of growth, to be quite frank. I think there's been a lot of changes in certain areas, but I think when it comes down to the same problems cropping up time and time again, and it's, you know, and I'm again 20 years into a career of seeing this and then working with women who are telling the same stories. The big problems that seem to all happen come down to time off.
Right.
So that's a big one, right? And being able to have time off. Kids get sick. Daycare's shut down. The daycare just announced today they're going on strike. So, you know, and it's like, well, if I was, you know, how am I going to balance that? And all of the women I know who've been impacted by that are now all trying to figure out how are we going to figure out, you know, the strike pattern now and taking care of our kids while we're working or in school or doing this or that. You end up using a lot of your vacation days for sick time. I think pretty much every single mother burns out of their vacation days before they use anything for themselves. So that reduces family time in a lot of ways. I think, so that's a huge one. I really think that needs to sit down and change and look at the fact that families need more support when it comes to time off. Being able to have more flexible work schedules. One of the biggest challenges is trying to get kids to daycare and get picked up on time. So the way that most daycares run is that they open and close at a specific time. If you are not within that time of picking your child up before they close, they charge you an X amount of money per 5 minutes for your late. And then after half an hour, usually what they do is they phone CAS, or there's someplace and your child will be given over to somebody else to be taken care of. So there's not all of them are like that, but a lot of the ones are pretty strict about it. So so if you just sit and look at, like, for example, one of the daycares I know, their hours start at 7 a.m. and they close at 4:30. So if you're trying to, that leaves you with a 30-minute travel window in the middle in the morning and a 30-minute travel window in the evening to get to work on time and get home. And we all know it takes more than 30 minutes to get across the city.
Yeah.
We all know that. Yeah. It takes 30 minutes to go a block sometimes. So there's that stress, right?
Yeah.
So being late all the time and having, so the flexibility of knowing that, you know, we don't need to be working 40-hour work weeks anymore. I don't think whether you're a parent or you're not a parent, no one needs to work that much. If you're competent and you're good at your job, you can do it in 20. You can do it in 40. If it takes you 60, you do 60. So I think there needs to be some advancement in understanding that with mothers and fathers or parents in general. That's like another complaint that we hear all the time for that constantly. And then a big one too then is promotions in the workplace. So a big thing is announcing pregnancy, the fear of telling your employer that you're pregnant, even though what the laws state, their laws are very much on the side of the women in this case, but it doesn't really matter necessarily if the employer still isn't going to accommodate those rights.
Yeah, because you still kind of have to prove it and all that added. Like, yeah. And
then, so there's the fear of, am I going to lose my job for this? And then coming back to work, am I coming back to a job? There's a lot of worry about that. Or am I coming back to the fact that I'm going to get demoted or I'm going to get passed up? I've heard a lot of stories of people being passed up because their employers have said, you know, we know they're in their baby making prime, so we won't advance them. We know that they're just going to take another maternity leave. So, which is illegal. You can't make a judgment like that. But again, women not knowing what their rights are is a different thing than employers taking advantage of that situation. So one of the things that within Rise that we've started is an educational series. So we're doing an educational series for women on different topics that directly impact them. And one of the ones that we're doing coming up is what a woman's right is in the workplace as a mother. So these are your legal rights, and these are what you do if these rights are violated in some way. And then another one we're working on, actually the first one we're launching, which is happening in April, is with in partnership with the Royal, and it's on mental health and working moms. And it's specifically on talking about mental health for working moms. Because we do a lot of conversations around like PPD and PPA, but we haven't really extended it past what happens when you go back to work, right? And what is that? Or if you have undiagnosed, like in my case, I had undiagnosed PPA. So taking that with me and back into the workplace. So I have anxiety coupled with work stress, and it was just like a hot mess.
And just for context, that's
postpartum anxiety or postpartum depression. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know. Familiar with that situation in a way. I can't really say it on the podcast, but it's sad and that it goes undiagnosed, and people don't know it because, you know, as someone who speaks about mental health and has mental illness, you know, once you learn about it, and you know, and part of your life, you kind of understand it. But before I knew about it, right, you don't understand anything's necessarily wrong in the moment.
Yep.
So for maybe a woman who has never been affected really by a mental illness, have no clue what depression feels like, no one in their families hasn't been surrounded by it, to all of a sudden be thrust into it. Like, I couldn't imagine that difficulty of trying to navigate it without knowing anything's wrong, but like just clearly you're just not responding like you normally would. Yeah, that's scary.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's, I don't know, I find it fascinating because, again, like, this isn't something I would necessarily talk to my mom about, right? Like, and as you learn about it as a young male and trying to think about when you're going to have a wife and kids and family and all those things going through. I guess turning it back on men, is there more that men can do in these types of situations? I mean, aside from, you know, if you're a boss, don't abuse a woman's right in the workplace, obviously, but like, just as a normal guy, like, what kinds of things can we do to help aid some of these processes and just encourage this to all be like a healthy transition?
I think one of the great things that has happened now is the extending the paternity leave.
Right.
So guys are now, fathers are now being able to get 5 weeks off. That's made a huge difference. I know for me, when my husband took the 5 weeks and then plus the coupled, he was home for close to 8 weeks. And that was right at the beginning, and I had no idea what I was doing. So, sorry, having that chance to have some support there was amazing. But I think one of the things, the way I would look at it the other way, isn't necessarily what can men do to support women, but what can employers do to support fathers? Because in a lot of, I think, all families where there's two parents in the house, being able to have the same type of support in place where the load can be shared instead of one person doing more than the other would make for a happier household. So recognizing, I think, that father's rights are as equal to a mother's right in the workplace, and that there should be a balancing out of what the men should get more than 5 weeks, and there should be a top up for fathers as well, and there for extra time off for kids, or not having to use your sick days and be penalized for it. I've heard the same stories of fathers wanting to take the time off and their employers saying to them, like, yeah, if you might want to think about that if you want your job still to be here.
Really, eh?
Yeah, so it's the same thing, right? It goes both ways. And I think I personally think we're way past that point of saying that, men should do X to support women. I think it really comes down to we as a society should do X to support each other.
Right.
So we should be offering more support to fathers, and we should be offering more support to mothers as well. So parents in general deserve it.
Why do you think what's the holdup, do you think? That why are we so slow to act on these, what seems like common sense basic principles that we're still slow and resistant, and in some case not meeting anywhere close to the needs? Like, why do you think we're still like this in a first world nation like Canada, the best in the world? We get on that list almost every year. Like what's going on, do you think?
I think a lot has to do with generational beliefs. And I think we will see it change. I just think there needs to be another rollover that happens.
Right. Okay.
So I think when pretty much with everything that's kind of moved forward in society where people have progressed, it's been generational change, right? So the ones behind start becoming the ones who are leading, and they implement these things into the workforce because it's the philosophies that they bring with them. So I know that we're going to get there. Like, I honestly think probably in the next 10 to 20 years, you're seeing more and more young people starting businesses, and they have very progressive ideas within the business. They're, getting into positions of leadership, and they're bringing that forward with them. So I do see that it's going to go that direction. I just think it's going to take some time. And also, we're in Ottawa, right? Like, we're a government town. So it's a different conversation, I think, here than it might be in Toronto, where it would be in Vancouver,
right, with
the fact that so many people are employed by the government. And everyone knows that trying to move that machine itself it's a different conversation there than if you're in the private sector.
Yeah. No, it's just sad that you have politicians. We support women. We're there for women. But then when you look under those words, it's just, we could talk about it, mental health in general, just how slowly everything's moving. And I remember talking to somebody, I can't remember if it was on the podcast or not, but it was, are we going to see change? And I'm in agreement. We will, but it's like, it's going to take so long, unfortunately, just to, like you said, get that generational swap, have governments move and pass through the bureaucracy and pass the bills. We move so slowly, and it's just unfortunate because there's so many people who are suffering or in distress, or it's not working right now. And we all kind of know it, but it's just kind of hanging on until hopefully things will change. And it's sad. I know I was talking there on the podcast, Nina, who's on, and she's studying workplace mental health and actually doing the studies and the research behind it. But she was saying, like, not even many people are even studying these effects, right? So we can sit here and talk about it all day, and we know it from experience and from the stories and from what we hear. But again, to get that movement, we need studies and research, and like, that's only just begun. Like, we just have people, and that's just mental health in general. That's not talking about what the effects it plays on women in the workplace and all that stuff. Like, It's so unfortunate.
But again, I think it comes down to that expectation that this is normal, right? That it's normal to be stressed. If you have a job, you should be stressed with your job.
Yeah.
And it's, for me personally, I think and having lived such a stressful career for so many years, I will never do it again. I'm just not going to.
Right.
Like, that isn't normal. It isn't healthy. It isn't the right thing to do. Stress is inevitable in your life, but there is healthy stress, and then there is stress that is debilitating. And making the choices to step away from that and say, this is not the right path for me, is something that we need to be providing to more people so that they can find a path that is a better thing for them to be able to manage. So again, like, just trying to drill it back to my hope with the work that I'm doing right now is being able to help these amazingly incredible, talented women I've met from all walks of life be able to say, like, I can pursue my education, I can pursue my wants, I can pursue my dreams, I can start a business, I can do whatever I want to do and be a mom without having the weight of the world come down on my shoulders. And that's where we need to be actually having the conversation. The weight of the world does not need to be sitting on us if we choose to want to have it all.
Right. Yeah. Is there a lot of fear with the people who are coming to see you that I can't have a successful career as a mother? That, like, if you want to be a CEO or a president or run a successful business, is there like a big fear for women that, like, it's not possible? Like, I have to choose. I have to be successful in my career, or I have to be successful as a mother. Like, I can't be high performing at both. Is that like a big thing? I
think many women fear that. I did.
Yeah.
I definitely feared that. And even starting this business, where, it's my third startup, and I know, and I drive usually when I'm doing a startup, and it's all consuming and it's everything I do. And in this case, I said, I'm setting hours, and at 4:00 when my daughter's off daycare, I'm a mom, and that's just what it is. So it's driving me again, but in a much more controlled manner. I think that it's, my aspirations are still there, but I think for me, it's kind of like, well, it might take me a couple more years to get to them, but I have more control over them this time. Right. However, not all people want to be entrepreneurs. So there's a very different thing when you work in a traditional workspace and you're trying to climb a ladder there. And you know what you have to do to get up that ladder. And if you're competing with someone who doesn't have children, it's a bigger climb.
Mm-hmm.
It is harder to do. It shouldn't be, but it is. So, and again, there are these unspoken realities. That's the piece to all of this conversation. Are people are going to say, well, that's not true. It's not really that hard in the workplace for working women, working mothers. And it's, all of these things are in place for them. Well, like maternity leave and all of these things. True. However, we've seen it now with the Me Too movement, and we've seen there's a lot of unspoken realities that still exist out there. So because people are afraid to speak up, they're afraid they're going to lose their jobs. They're afraid they're going to be sued. They're afraid that they're going to be, held down in their careers. There's fear overtakes voices on too many occasions.
Right. Yeah, and it goes back to what I said right off the top, that I'm someone who's completely naive to all these situations, right? I only see when I talk to people and what I see on social media, and you're right, the fear, because we have so much riding on these careers and these jobs. If people lose their jobs, you're devastated and set back financially, emotionally. Mentally, all those things, it's a complete devastation to you. And especially when you, like you said, you define yourself by your career, you lose almost a personal identity. Yeah. So, cynically, I think employers know that, and they hold that over our heads. And yeah, you're right. There's so many conversations that need to be had, and it's just, it's unfortunate, but a big part of the reason why I wanted to have someone like you on to help learn about it and then, spread that message. I guess my next question, as I ponder a good way to say it, if you had a room full of managers that, they wanted to learn more, okay, how do we practically what are the things, how would you try to change their behavior? If is there some sort of pitch, if you had a room full of the most powerful people, this is what you need to do. This is what is going to ensure, not only women, but all workplaces healthy for parents and all these things we were talking about. What's how you tackle something like that?
That's a great question. First of all, I don't think it's just male bosses that need to be in the room.
Interesting. Okay.
So I think it's bosses, period, that need to be in the room. I think the way I probably would approach it the same conversation that I've been approaching it with women. There's the 5 tips that I've been giving to women who are going back to the workforce. And one of them is first of all, get your daycare in place right away. Get your daycare in place way before you, if you can, before you even give birth. Get it in place.
That early?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
It's a tremendously difficult thing to find a good daycare. There's lots of daycares, but a good daycare is very challenging. I interviewed 62 daycares before we went with the one that we went with when I was going. 62.
Ooh, I had no idea.
Yeah, yeah. And then some of the ones I walked into, I wouldn't have left a dog there. So that would be one thing. And then I would turn that to say to employers, you need to be accommodating of people with their daycare needs. So, for example, I don't think most employers know, but that actually in the human rights laws, that you can't penalize an employee who leaves because of daycare reasons. So for strikes, because there's a daycare shutdown, your child is sick, there's a daycare shutdown for vacations, things like that. By law, parents are allowed to take that time. Most employers don't know that. Most employees don't know that.
Yep.
Yep.
No idea.
Yep. So there's a duty to accommodate when it comes to that. So that'd be one thing I'd say. Another thing I would say is setting boundaries. So I've always said to all moms who are going back, set your boundaries before you walk back in. If you are not willing to do the hours that you used to do, set those boundaries clearly before you start so there's no miscommunication. And as an employer, I would say when you hear those boundaries that are being set, respect the boundaries. They're there for a reason. So it doesn't mean that an employee wants to come back in and be less productive than they used to be, or that they don't care as much as they used to, but they're carrying a much bigger load now than what they had previously. So you're still going to get, it's better to get the best of the people who work for you in a smaller time span than to make them work long time spans and get nothing out of them.
Yeah.
Except for resentment and then eventually a resignation letter. You know, just let's be logical about it. And then I think the other piece that I've said to a lot of moms, like I'm trying to think of my 5, which 3 I would go with, is to really that's a great question. I'm stumped on what the other one would be. I think probably to be, again, really organized and so understanding, again, how you need to run your calendar in the day and how you need to get out of the house to manage the stress levels that you're going to have. So for me, everything got a lot better when I got hyper organized, and I was a very organized person to begin with, but doing everything the night before. So laying out all the clothes the night before, making all the lunches the night before, gassing up the car the night before. So it sounds silly, but stopping in the morning when you have a kid in the back of the car, not all places will let you use your card or to tap.
Okay.
And so you have to get out, you have to take your child out of the car, you have to go in to pay, you have to come back, strap your child back into the car, get back into the car, drive away.
They could be kicking and screaming.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
They didn't like breakfast
No,
that morning.
like a 3-minute stop has now become 20 minutes.
Yeah.
So all of these things kind of roll into place with that. And then on the time that I would say is understand as an employer that those days that people are late is because something went wrong. And sometimes kids just don't work with you sometimes. They just decide, nope, this isn't going to happen, and nothing you're going to do is going to make it happen until you just you got to wait it out, right? So you're going to be late. People will be late. Don't penalize the lateness as well. I think already, the pressure you're feeling to get out the door, and then you have your 2-year-old on the floor having a tantrum, and you're thinking, oh my God, my boss is going to, yell at me when I walk in. You don't need that. Right. You don't need to work yourself into a state like that before you even hit traffic. So
it makes me think of people who work shift work or service hours. Not everyone necessarily has the salaried career. Are you also dealing with women in that? Because that adds a whole other kind of little element to those things you were talking about, where it's if you're the one who has to be there to open the store and your kid's not, it adds that extra stress.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. Some of the women that I am dealing with in that tend to be the ones who are looking for different careers.
Right. Yeah. Because you need something that's a little more flexible.
A little more flexible. Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, too, there's, it's dependent too. If you have a lot of family support at home, sometimes things will be easier for you. In our case, my husband and I are it. There is no backup. It's just the two of us. So if something goes wrong with there's only other one person to call on. So that changes things for people as well.
Yeah.
Is that support network, or that build a village, so to speak. I don't really know if villages exist very much anymore for most people.
Yeah,
most parents.
It's kind of sad, how we. Yeah. I guess part of that's technology, but also part lifestyle. With again the work hours. Yeah. Now you're involved with your kid. Sometimes it's hard to build that community and be social and see friends, right? Based on circumstance. Do you also help single women and stuff like that? Single women, single mothers. Yep. Sorry, single women.
Yeah, single moms. Yes. Yeah.
What kind of that presents even a more particular set of challenges. You hear those heroic stories of the women who work 3 jobs and the kids have to, make dinner themselves. How hard is it for just putting it into perspective, outside of Hollywood and the movies and things you see on the internet? How hard is it for these women right now?
Being a single mother is the most difficult thing to do.
Yeah.
I was raised by a single mom.
Really? Okay.
So I feel I can say that with all confidence, that being a single mother is the most challenging job you will ever have in your entire life. I don't have anything to complain about in comparison to, how hard it is to do that all alone by yourself. And it's being a parent, first of all, the job never stops. It doesn't stop. There is no punch out with that. So, if your child is at daycare, even though you're not with them, you're still there. You know, they're so you add onto the fact that there's nobody to tag you out in difficult situations, that just makes things worse, I think. But again, you know, looking at half full, women are very resilient. They're incredibly powerful. They figure out ways to make things work in situations that other people would probably give up on. They dig in when they need to dig in. They cry when they need to cry. They ask for help when they need to ask for help. I think that's the wonderful thing about women and like the moms groups that are there, is that you can get some really great friendships that come out of that that make things a lot easier.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
No, it always amazed me, like, you know, the whole mom always knows type thing growing up, right? Like just the intuitiveness of you know, my mom, your mom, people's moms, right? Like it's just how they like, always had the answer, always seemed to know something was wrong. It's just, yeah, it's almost like magic.
Yes,
like, you
true,
know,
yeah.
Is there something that just like kicks in all of a sudden when you become a mother, or is it just you pick it up as you go? Like, what?
I don't know. I think again, everyone would answer that differently. Yeah, nobody shares the same experience.
Yeah,
I think we might have like common things, but it's some people just seem really natural at it. Other people struggle at it. There's certain things I struggle at tremendously as a mom. There's other things that I think, for me, I was meant to do. They're just, sometimes I sit there and I actually say to myself, boy, I'm a good mom today.
Yeah.
And then there's other days I look at myself and go, sheesh, that was not one of my epic moments right there. So
yeah. That's a good thing, right? It's, as I mentioned, that the mom always knows that it's like important to note that it's okay to struggle.
Yeah.
As a parent, as a mom, that like it's not always going to be picture perfect.
Yeah.
And I've had those discussions with my mom now that I'm an adult.
Yeah.
And we look back at the moments that, you know, between us that weren't like the best, but like to realize they human, like your mother's still a human being with needs and as a person, and that like can't be perfect all the time.
And I think the interesting thing for me that I've learned, again, being an older parent, is that without my mom, so I'm parenting without parents, so both my parents are gone, is that when I became a mother, I suddenly understood my own mother very differently. So I found that I spent a lot of time now thinking about the relationship we had together and the decisions she made and who she was as a woman, and going from a woman to a mother. And because when I was a child, or a daughter, because I no longer am a daughter, I looked at my mother as my mother, but now I look at her as a woman. That's what I see her as, is a woman, and understanding really the difference of trying to balance those two different identities in one body. And then and my mother was also a very accomplished professional, so there's a third identity that you just threw into to that as well. So I think for me that was really one of the most fascinating realizations that I had as a parent, was my mother was a woman long before she was a mom.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just out of curiosity and from your opinion, do you think, you know, I mean, having kids in general, as from someone who doesn't have kids, do you think that like offers an added set of benefits for being like at work, like being an employee for somebody? Like, does it make you a better employee? Does it make you a better worker at all from being experienced as a mother, as a parent?
I don't think so.
No,
I don't think there is a difference between, you're a good employee if you have children, you're a good employee if you don't have children. I've hired so many people over the years, and never would I have looked at somebody and said their work performance was based on whether they had, you know, bread or not. So no, I don't.
Okay.
No, I don't think so. I think having children changes you in different ways. It might make you a more loyal employee because of the fact that you're not necessarily wanting to jump around as much as you used to, and the financial responsibilities are massive. So that might be one of the changes, but I don't think it doesn't make you suddenly, you know, be better at math or anything like that. So
True.
yeah.
What about like things like empathy or, I one of the people I work with, I call him my work dad, and because he's the same age as my dad, but we share an office, and always joke about that father-son relationship in a way, because he has kids, but he's older, and I don't know that he seems to want to nurture me and see my career growth. I don't know if it comes from as like being a parent or as much as just like a working relationship.
I don't know. So I did a lot of mentorship before I had my daughter, and I think if you are empathetic, you're empathetic, and if you're compassionate, you're compassionate. You can't teach those things, though you have them or you don't.
Right.
And for me, I would say those skills make you a better employer than, or they make you a better employee. Those are the things that people want to be looking for, more than they're going to be saying, let's hire somebody who has children.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So what, I know we've talked about kind of what your clients might be going through. What is all that thing? What kind of services do you offer? I know it was the wine thing that really kind of like,
Yeah.
So what types of things do you offer for people and supports? And I know you mentioned education and things like that.
So they're pretty specific what we do.
Okay.
So strategy is the first part. So I offer a free 30-minute consultation to any mom who just wants to talk. So within that time, it really gives me a chance to see where they're at, what they're worried about, where they are professionally, where they want to be going, and then be able to build something for them that's specific to their needs. So that can usually include a resume reboot, so redoing resumes, a LinkedIn reboot as well, or creating one. If you have a bad LinkedIn profile, it's better to not just have one, period. Because that's the first thing people look at when they are looking to hire people, is they Google and they click LinkedIn immediately. So you want to be putting most of your effort into your resume and your LinkedIn before anything else.
I'm worried about my LinkedIn.
Yeah, so it really does matter. It really matters. People kind of forget about it.
Yeah,
but
I know a lot of young, there's definitely a section of young people for sure that are really into it, and a lot of friends and stuff, and they do a good job. But someone like me in the industry I'm in, it doesn't necessarily rely as much on LinkedIn as it does about connection. So I haven't put a lot of thought and time. I made it in college because they told me they had one. I've updated it over the years, but I don't think about it too often now. I'm all like, ugh.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, right? Is that if you use it as a static page, that's fantastic, but have a really good looking static page. So that's the other thing that we look at is social media profiles. So if you're in an industry where your social media is going to be more important, that's where I come in and I kind of clean it up, and it's basically a branding. So it's looking right across the board of, I'm going to create your positioning statement for you. I'm going to create everything that goes behind that. I do website building as well for people. So I've had one client where we did her full brand because she was moving from the nuclear industry into food security. So trying to shift her from being known as this very well-known nuclear wizard to food security. We redid everything. So the headshots, we took care of the website. I built the website for her, LinkedIn, her resume, everything that we've done, her Facebook profile. So kind of like across the gamut, right? With a personal brand that I offer too. And then I also offer two programs as well. One is we call it the Momternship program. So offering as an internship from women, moms, specifically for moms who've never been able to have work experience on their resume. So a lot of women who have decided they've raised their children, the kids are grown, they want to go in back, they want to get a job, and there's nothing on their resume, and nobody will hire them, or people won't take them as an intern because of the fact that they have what they deem as no skills. So I will take them. So I have the partnerships I'm starting now with local colleges and community colleges, where we go and we say this is specifically who we're headhunting for, are for the placements that women who can't get placed elsewhere, I will take them on and they'll get placed with me. And what I do is provide them with a work experience. I'll do their resume for them, and then I give a reference as well. And so it's a win-win for me because I get some really great work that comes from these really amazing women.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
But also the chance for them to be able to get real work experience, and now they have something on their resume. So it's just a matter of believing in people, right?
Right,
Like I
yeah.
believe in this give it forward principle. So we all should be paying it forward a bit.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that. And then the other thing I run is a bursary program. So there's a lot of women who can't afford my fees. So I either will do something where I'll trade a service for it. So if you're really great at this, I'll do your work for free. Or we have also women who donate so women who've actually been quite successful in their career will make a donation, and that donation is to buy services for women who need a hand up.
great.
So we run that as well. So, and then the 2 educational series that I do, which is the Wine and Learns, which are fully focused on arming people with the information they need to know in the workforce. And then we do the Rise Mama speaker series, which are really prominent women in the community who've had really successful, inspiring stories. And that's an evening event. So again, wine, some good food, get your mom's night out on,
Yeah,
and, come listen to another woman who's done a really good job. So
That's great.
yeah, so that's what we do. Yeah.
And so you just kind of launched all this stuff,
Mm-hmm.
right? So have you had a chance to like have one of those nights yet? And moving forward into it?
Yeah, the first night's March 30th, and we have Diane Bergeron who's coming in, and Diane is a very, very high up professional with the CNIB, which is the Canadian National Institute for the Blind, and she also is an Ironman and a mom and a wife, and she's blind.
Oh.
So fully blind, yeah. So she's coming in. I know her. She's amazing, an amazing human being. So she's coming in to do a talk about her life as a mom and a working mom and all the things she's accomplished along the way. So,
Wow.
and all the things she had to do as well. She has a great story about the time she had to work on a chicken farm. And, so that's our first night that we're doing is the 30th. And then we're booking our women for the other nights as well.
Yeah.
So they rotate. So 1 month it's the evening series. The next month it's the daytime series.
Right,
So
okay.
back and forth, yeah. So
Right.
there's, so December is the only month that nothing will be planned, but we're almost fully booked for the year already. So
That's amazing.
yeah, I'm
Yeah.
excited about them. I think it's going to
Yeah.
be really awesome. And they're intimate. So the Wine and Learns, which are the daytime series, is only 25 women. So you're getting really, really focused attention from the speakers. And the evening events are only 50 women. So again, you're getting a chance to really kind of rub shoulders with some great people in the community. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm is there a lot of networking for women like this as well? Like when you hear of networking, you think of kind of like high up professionals looking to trade business and stuff like that. But when you get, it's almost like taking the student kind of networking experience, right? Where you don't have a lot, but you get introduced to employers and try to make an impression, stuff like that. What's the community like in Ottawa specifically for the women like this? Like, is it a very supportive community? Like, is it kind of something that's lacking a little bit?
Uber supportive.
Right. Good.
Yeah, uber supportive. Even just with other women who are running their own businesses or things like that. So for me, my launch really has been based on mothers groups. So the Facebook moms groups or Instagram groups, and people who are like mom bloggers, things like that. I specifically from Brianna Chapman, who runs Dope Moms of Ottawa. She has been so supportive of the work I'm doing, unbelievably supportive. And I'm starting to get a tremendous amount of potential clients coming out of her group. And it's all because I worked with her and helped her, and she gave one shout out to me, and it just kind of opened up this floodgate, right? And this is what women are supposed to do for each other.
Yeah.
We're supposed to help each other out, and moms are supposed to help moms out because we know how hard it is. So it's a really supportive community. I'm feel blessed, to have been able to be part of this. So yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And just out of curiosity, is it like, do you do like internet calls, telecalls, or just right now, just as we're getting started, it's kind of just Ottawa based?
No, I can do, so I am Ottawa and Gatineau, so we're on both sides.
Okay, yeah.
But I'm able to do across the country and as well, because really all I need is that first 30 minutes to an hour with the person, and most of the work I can do, it can be done through email, the web. Yeah. So I'm able to go pretty much anywhere. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, if this resonates with people and they're interested and they want to learn more, where can they reach out to you? How can they find you?
So they can find us at risemama.ca.
Okay.
And so RISE Mama, MAMA, and also on Facebook at Rise Mama and on Instagram at Rise Mama.
Perfect.
So yeah, we are branded right across with that Rise Mama.
That's
so,
good.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming in and sharing this with me. I know it's been a big eye opener for me, and I know it will be for a lot of people because, again, like you said, these unspoken conversations that just women know it and it happens to them all the time, but like it's just never talked about.
Yeah.
So I appreciate you sharing that insight with me.
Thank you for giving me a place to talk. I appreciate it.
Okay. Jen Ditchfield, everybody. Rise Mama. Check it out. Bye.
You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.